A young girl's voice suddenly drops into a gruff, adult male growl, coming from somewhere deep in her throat while her mouth barely moves. Investigators recorded it on tape. Speech therapists studied it. And decades later, a radio listener identified the exact dead man that voice belonged to. This isn't a horror movie plot. It's one of the most extensively documented paranormal cases in British history. It started on August 31st, 1977, at a modest home on Green Street in Enfield, London, where a single mother named Peggy Hodgson lived with her 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy. Peggy called emergency services after reporting loud knocking sounds and furniture moving entirely on its own. Here's the detail that immediately set this case apart from typical haunting stories. The responding police officers, professionals with no reason to embellish anything, reportedly witnessed some of the phenomena themselves. Word reached the Society for Psychical Research, a serious organization dedicated to investigating exactly these kinds of claims, and they sent 2 investigators to look into it directly. Maurice Gross was a retired inventor and businessman who joined the society following his own personal experiences he believed were paranormal, following the death of his daughter. Guy Lyon Playfair was a writer with genuine prior investigative experience studying paranormal claims in Brazil. These weren't amateur ghost hunters. They spent an enormous amount of time actually documenting the case, logging an estimated 2,000 separate incidents over the following months. What they documented was genuinely strange. Furniture reportedly moved and spun on its own in front of witnesses. Small objects, marbles, Lego pieces, were repeatedly found thrown across rooms. And most famously, investigators captured audio recordings of a deep, gruff adult male voice, coming directly out of young Janet Hodgson, while her own mouth remained still or barely moved at all. Naturally, skepticism followed immediately, and a lot of it was well-founded. Stage magician and professional paranormal debunker James Randi dismissed the entire case as a hoax, pointing to a lack of hard physical evidence, and noting that children under real emotional stress, in this case from a broken home, are entirely capable of fabricating this kind of activity for attention. Janet herself later admitted to faking at least some of the widely circulated levitation photographs. A former president of the Society for Psychical Research even suggested Janet might simply be an unusually talented ventriloquist. But here's where the case resists a simple, tidy explanation. Speech therapists who actually examined the recordings found something genuinely hard to dismiss. Janet's throat and voice had changed in ways consistent with real physiological strain, not typical performance. And while sustaining a fake ventriloquist voice briefly is plausible for a child, experts noted it would be highly unusual to sustain it convincingly for hours at a time, which is what the tapes reportedly captured. Then, decades later, came the detail that reopened the entire case for a new generation. That deep, gruff male voice on the original recordings was played publicly on an LBC radio talk show. A listener called in and identified the voice specifically as belonging to his own father, a man named William Charles Wilkins. Records confirmed Wilkins had actually lived in that exact house, had gone blind later in life, suffered a hemorrhage, and died sitting in a chair downstairs in 1963, years before the Hodgson family ever moved in. So here's the honest, unresolved core of this story. Some elements were absolutely faked, by Janet's own later admission. But the voice recordings, analyzed by professionals who found real physiological changes difficult to fake for hours, matched to a real deceased man who had genuinely died in that exact house, remain the detail that keeps this case from being fully closed, even decades and multiple investigations later.